for our discussion on the metaverse. Today, we're going to be discussing some social aspects, some work aspects, and anything and everything in between. Right now, I'm joined with Ryan and Raphael. Raphael, would you mind introducing yourself? And then Ryan, would you mind going right after?
Sure. Hey, everybody. Hi, this is Raphael Brown. Nice to meet all of you. So I'm a game developer, game designer, XR developer. I've been designing games for 26 years now. And so I run my own studio, Symbol Zero, and I'm in the process of raising money for some cloud platform work. In terms of things that I've worked on, a whole ton of PC, console, and mobile games from EA, Activision, Nintendo, and many others. And then more recently, our group has been working with Roblox, where we've been building virtual concerts for folks like Sony and Warner. So probably the two biggest are the Little Nas X virtual concert experience, which is the second largest virtual concert by population globally, after the Fortnite Travis Scott one. And then also the 21 Pilots virtual concert that we did last year with Roblox and Warner. So we are continuing to build virtual concerts in Roblox. We're actually working on one right now and planning out a whole bunch of them across the next couple of years with Roblox.
That's really cool. Thank you for stopping by. I'm actually really glad that you brought up Roblox. I think we'll dive into that a little bit today. Ryan, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Joe Schmo, for the introduction or the opportunity to introduce myself. I'm Ryan Feldman. I am a, how do I describe myself? I'm an XR specialist. I know a lot about the space. I love researching the space, and that is what I do as part of my day job. The other side of that is development. So I have been working in Unity for over 10 years. 5 of those years have been with VR, AR, and mixed reality experiences. And yeah, I'm just very passionate about the XR space and what it can bring to humanity. And I've always been a big proponent of social games. So MMOs are one of my favorite game genres to play. I love just being with other people in virtual worlds. And the metaverse kind of coming to fruition is very exciting to me. So happy to be here, and I'm sure I'll get to talk more about myself a bit later, but I'll cut it off there.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. And then we have our third speaker. How do you pronounce your name?
Hello, we
Hello?
can't hear you, unfortunately. Maybe you can mute
Can you hear me
yourself
now?
and unmute your microphone. No, I'm talking about
sorry about
the
that.
third speaker. Hello.
Hi, Avinash. Are you good? we see you, but we don't hear you. Even though
I had to leave the room and come back. I'm not sure if that might be helpful if it's your first time jumping into a room.
Yeah. You might want to leave the room, go into the main part of the app, and make sure that you've got your microphone enabled, and depending on what mobile device, go into the settings. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. So while he figures that out real quick, I just wanted to ask you too, what does the metaverse mean to you? Let's say I'm a complete newbie to the space. How would you, Raphael, explain this concept of what is coming to fruition?
Sure. So I can actually, I'll try to keep this short because this is something I've worked around for a long time. So I come from a space where We figure out how to do things and then we build towards them. And you talk about them as you're building towards them, but you try to be distinct about what is here and what is not. The metaverse, to me, is like extended reality in that we have some VR and AR devices. We don't have XR devices yet. We don't have the metaverse yet. What we have right now is we have peak internet, and we're just starting to talk about a thing that's two to 3 decades away. But it could be amazing if we work to it and don't pretend like it's here now. What we have right now is peak internet, that the internet started in the 80s. I'm old enough that I don't remember ARPANET, that was before my time. I remember BitNet well, and I remember the early parts of the internet, and I remember the web, which came in 1990. We are trying to get towards a thing that comes out of science fiction and desire, but also a really predictable computing path, which is the internet is a thing that runs 2D images, text, and links really well, and it's kind of shit at everything else, and that's okay. Sorry for my language. And then the web came in 1990, the internet came in the early 80s. The web is a thing that solidified that and said, here's an interoperable layer for the internet. With that, we then started to go, hey, we're taking these other things online. Games came online in the early 90s, pretty much right around the same time as the web. Games go back to frankly, the 70s, and VR goes back to the 50s. But we then said, okay, now we've got games. Games don't run on the web, they run on the internet. So
Hello.
games are, hey, we got you, excellent.
Okay.
So
Hello, thanks for stopping by.
So games are parallel to the internet, and then we started to get streaming audio, first downloading and then streaming audio and then streaming video, and cloud. These are all things in parallel that are all running on the internet. Coming out of Tron back in 1982, the notion of the grid, Neuromancer and the Sprawl trilogy, starting in 82 with Neuromancer, William Gibson's sci-fi classic, and then 10 years later in 92, Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash. A whole bunch of us looked at that and said, we want that, we want to build that. It's an aspirational thing. And so we've been building towards that. And since the advent of the GPU in 1996, the commercial GPU, we've started to actually make strides toward it. So there have been 26 years now of trying to get towards it, and we're about halfway there. We need to get to a metanet that can host a metaverse, and we need to do about 2 to 3 decades of experiments on the content and software and platform side, while the hardware works really hard along with network infrastructure and protocol to get to a metaverse. So XR is an aspirational thing. Metaverse is an aspirational thing. It's okay to have metaverse communities, and we kind of need them to get to a metaverse, but we can't pretend that it's here now, because there's a lot of hard work to do to get to it. And I and others have been working towards it for decades because we care about it. So I want to stress, like, metaverse, aspirational, wonderful. I've been dreaming about it since I saw Tron as a kid. I want to get to that, but I don't want to pretend that the internet is the metaverse, because the metaverse is the thing that comes after the web, and it sits on an infrastructure after the internet. So that's kind of the historical grounding I wanted to give.
I think that's a really great point to make. I totally agree, because with us calling what we have now the metaverse in itself, I think that's taking a lot away from the people like yourself who have been working for years at this point to get to something like the metaverse at some point. Avinash, would you introduce yourself to everybody and just tell us a little
Hey
bit about
everybody,
yourself?
yes, thank you so much for having me here. I'm Avinash Kaushik. I'm the founder CEO of Waka World. Here at Waka World, we are trying to build a suite of solutions for companies who want to enter the metaverse journey, and it's and I totally agree with what you guys are saying. The metaverse is a long way to go, and in this journey, the first step that we see is immersive experiences, and especially for we work on the B2B side, so we are working with all these fashion brands and heritage fashion brands who are experimenting, creating fan experiences and engagements. Um, so we provide them suite of solutions, be it on DeFi or on live streaming content into the metaverse, and creating virtual showrooms, immersive showrooms. It's pretty much like a multiplayer game where shoppers can come in. So there's social shopping, but it's more immersive. It's no longer yeah, unidirectional. The shopper is no longer a spectator to visualize and to view and interact and purchase, but it's the shopper is part of the whole scene. It's part of the environment, and interacting with the influencers or stylists and sales associates in form of avatars in immersive showrooms. So this is what we are trying to create, because we totally believe that fashion in the for one of the first pit stops to conquer, to get to an experiential journey in the metaverse. So NFTs are the couture of the metaverse, and we work with various fashion brands um, in helping them navigate the space. Over to you guys. That's me.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I totally agree with you on the fact that fashion in the metaverse is probably going to be like one of the most important slash like first big things that hits the fan, because everybody's going to have to be represented in some way, and everybody's going to want to do it differently. It's going to be huge. Ryan, I wanted to jump to you and ask you, how will the metaverse improve our jobs and our professional life? We can't hear you. I'm sorry.
Ryan, it doesn't look like you're muted. Try talking again.
Okay, we'll just wait for him to come back. Raphael, if you wanted to take that one over while he's gone. Actually, he's right back. Ryan, how will the metaverse improve our jobs and our professional lives?
All right, let's give this another try. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Great. Well,
Yep, we can
I'm
hear
happy
you.
I got a different. Okay, good. I'm happy I got a different question about the metaverse, because I think it was very well spoken. But first, I want to piggyback, and then I'll circle back to your question. I agree that the metaverse is a destination. It's where we're trying to get to. It's a world of ideals, where we're breaking the limitations of reality and kind of ascending higher into hopefully something that's better for humanity, not just mirroring the real world in a digital sense, but also extending it and kind of expanding it beyond what's possible today. So I think there are a lot of different people that are involved in kind of creating these different areas of the metaverse, work and productivity being one of them, entertainment being another, socialization kind of spreading across in more of an umbrella. So as far as how will it improve, the way that we work, or improve or change the way that we work, I think it boils down to you will be able to work in ways that you never were able to work before in real life. You'll be able to collaborate with someone who's across the world, and it'll feel like you're at the level of fidelity of their avatars and the tracking and sensors we'll have at our disposal. But right now, we're definitely in our infancy. Even at Immersed, we recognize that there's still a lot left to be desired. when it comes to, even just our app and the use case that we're pursuing, but kind of across the board, we're all kind of evolving in real time and adapting our experiences to the expectations being set by the community. So the more to, this very infant version of the metaverse, the more we can kind of hash it out and figure out what works and what doesn't, as opposed to speculating. So I think, it's necessary to take these baby steps, and it's been a long time coming, but yeah, we still have a ways to go. And thankfully we have a lot of very passionate people in the space that are willing to put their ideas out there and solicit the feedback from everyone else to make those ideas the best they can be.
Very well spoken. I totally agree. Avinash, I was going to ask you, what is the metaverse here to kind of stay? Is it the future, or is this just a fad? Is this just a passing moment? Is this just a fleeting moment that is just going to die down in a couple of years once all the corporate bigwigs have made like a bandit and made some profit? What do you think?
I totally believe metaverse is a destination. It's a long again, I repeat, it's a work in progress. There are multiple things that are contributing to, and there are multiple technologies that are converging to form what we call the metaverse, the completely decentralized co-creative world. And people started working on contract work, or people started working on freelance long ago, and this whole new immersive world is taking that trend and giving it a whole new dimension where you don't have to be attached or to be tagged to one company or one community. You can go into various co-creative opportunities in this world and contribute. It's a creator's world, and its true power will be unleashed when it's completely decentralized. But having said that, a metaverse does not necessarily have to have a blockchain or necessarily have to be completely eclipsing the Web 2, which is more centralized and company or incorporation owned ecosystem. So there, I totally believe there is an equilibrium, a healthy equilibrium that should come between the Web 2 and the Web 3, where there are certain business models that cannot be decentralized, and there are certain business models that is begging to be decentralized. So there is an opportunity. It's just not a fad. It's inevitable development that's happening, where even a large company. So we work with various fashion brands, and there are different formats, and what we are doing right now is just getting our feet wet in this space. So what we are seeing from the brand side is they are creating virtual showrooms, or like Nike is creating Nike Land on various platforms, metaverse platforms. But at the same time, several brands are creating their own immersive showrooms that is embedded in their own browser. And to take it to the next stage, they're opening it up for the fans and saying, "Hey, come in and create something that that gels well with the brand." And it's a fan generated content or fan created experience in the brand's own immersive world. When this extends to a large scale and gets more decentralized, it starts taking shape of and format of a metaverse, because you're allowing many people to come in and create things. And though it is governed by largely governed by the company and its own culture, um, but then it's kind of a format of metaverse which is more governed and a little closed. But going forward, there would be many more. Like every brand would try to create its own experiences um, closer to the culture and the ideology that resonates with their own fans and followers. But then you will also have um, the large scale metaverse platforms from the ones that you've been mentioning, um, and it will be a coexistence. The way we have seen e-commerce, there are e-commerce marketplaces, there are D2C platforms today. Similarly, you will see many more, um, metaverse kind of ecosystems, microcosms existing, uh, offered by every business. At the same time, you will find many open metaverses. There are closed metaverses. There are various formats, and it's an evolving space, and we will see different business models and different templates emerging as we progress. I'm done speaking.
Can I actually
Yeah,
jump in?
Yeah, go ahead.
So just piggybacking on that, I think that it's worth stressing to folks that going towards the metaverse is not about Web 2 versus Web 3. Being frank, web is one of several things that runs on the internet, and it's actually become a much smaller thing than a lot of people realize. You have to keep in mind that at this point, if you look at it as individual threads, you basically have web running on the internet, you have games, you have streaming audio, you have streaming video, and you have just generalized cloud. And the reality is that cloud actually hosts and runs what you could sort of, and also, sorry, social media as well. Cloud runs most of social media, cloud runs most of games, cloud runs most of streaming audio and streaming video. So whether it's Spotify or Netflix or Facebook or Activision Blizzard, almost everything runs on cloud. And so we're going towards a future that will be a hybridization of centralized and decentralized, because, and this may be hard for some people to realize, but it's not all about the web. It's about finding ways to bring these things together so that in a future metaverse that runs on a metanet, that we are less fragmented, and that these pieces come together. But in them coming together, it would be ideal to have people able to hold, to build and hold their identity, but that identity needs to be able to go back and forth between walled gardens and open gardens and semi-permeable gardens, because a lot of those spaces that people are going to want to go into will be curated and moderated spaces. A lot of Web3 is pushback against Web 2, but they're forgetting that 80–90% of the internet doesn't touch the web except to go, hey, read news about your part of the industry on the web. We've moved mostly past the web. XR doesn't run on the web. VR devices don't run on the web. AR devices don't run on the web. AR mostly runs on cloud, whether it is doing local AR or geospatial AR. So we're trying to get to this more complex notion that is not Web 2 versus Web 3, and web folks need to make peace with that, because we need to get to a better understanding of how to mediate between centralized and decentralized spaces so that we can go, we want our individual biometric and identity rights to be respected. We want to interact with corporations that will build complex and wonderful spaces that go beyond the ability of decentralized communities to build. And we want to be able to take our presence into them and bring it out of them. There's a lot to explore there. There's, people talk about interoperability and it mostly doesn't exist, and it's going to take a long time. But what we can start to do is take our identities back and forth as we start to get more people online. And frankly, we're just starting to get more people going from video to an interactive 2D space like this, or an interactive 3D space. We're trying to take everybody online in the world and get them used to just interacting in different ways and realizing the potential. And so in that, we need to stay away from kind of this conflicting, is it centralized or decentralized? We've got 20 years to figure that out. We don't actually know the balance, but what we do know in technology is that we throw everything away. There are no sacred cows, there are no religions. In technology, we try it, we break it, we fix it. Nothing that we build now is permanent. I mean, I can remember working under, so I worked at a lot of different studios. I worked under John Carmack at id Software, and he would stress VR, you know, like we had this range of like PC, console, mobile, and we were starting to experiment with early VR. And he was like, these are all computing devices. Anything that we do now, it's not permanent. If people love it, that's great. If they come back to it, that's even better. It's important that people learn, like this is why he always stressed open source. Put it out there, let people play with it, let people break it. Nothing is permanent. NFTs are not permanent. Web3 is not permanent. Games are not permanent. Everything is changing. The most important thing that we can do is learn from everything, take it apart, dissect it, and know that everything in technology that we make will die because we'll make something better. And we don't know the balance of it. And this is also why when Carmack has talked about the metaverse, John has stressed very specifically, we don't need to go off and build the metaverse architecture now. We don't know what the use cases are. You know, it's like, go off and build some stuff and let's learn from it and let's see what people react to. What do they play? What do they like? Then we go from there and we rip that apart and we put it back together and we keep trying. But you go through this process where you keep trying to get to the thing that you want, but you don't really know, because you shouldn't have a perfect conception in your head. Instead, you go, what does the audience like? What do they need? What should we do next? You keep a vision of where you want to get to, but along the way, you're constantly adjusting and you're reacting to what people need next. And that's what we do in games, but I think that's applicable to the larger sense of like, we'll get to that thing, that metaverse, but don't have a sacred cow. Don't say this thing can never be touched. This thing is permanent. Nothing is permanent, because we'll always make it better. But we won't actually make it better until we put the first thing in your hands and we go, okay, you liked this, you didn't like this. Okay, let's go back to the drawing board. Let's build a better thing. Now let's give you a new thing and see what you like. Until we do that over and over, we just don't know.
I think there's a balance with that though, where, you know, maybe the sacred cow isn't the feature or the communication paradigm, but it could be the use case. You know, there could be some very clear use cases for the technology, and a company like Immersed has drawn a line in the sand and basically said, I don't care what any of y'all say, this, like, XR technology can help us be more productive and focus better, and we'll do whatever it takes to unlock that potential. And thankfully, our users are very vocal, and so we get that audience feedback and we solicit it and kind of embrace the idea that the feature, the way that it was built, might not be sacred, but there very well could be something there. So we're constantly kind of in the iteration loop and kind of take the agile process to the extreme, where when the space is evolving so rapidly, you have no choice as a small organization that can afford to make those pivots, but to iterate and try out as many things as quickly as possible and see what sticks. And unfortunately, the design decisions aren't very clear in the metaverse quite yet. The best thing that we have in Immersed is basically root what we can in reality, in familiar experiences that people already have, and then try to expand those. So if you're used to being able to, reach out and grab your monitor to tilt and fine adjust it, you should be able to do that in immersed. And there are other even more nuanced things that we're kind of starting to figure out, but it always circles back to what expectations do people have, and are they bringing those from other XR experiences, or are they bringing them from the real life, or real life or science fiction? I mean, we still have users come into our app and say like this. Now I'm officially like Iron Man, and I'm like, no, not really. Like this is, you know, virtual reality monitors, a nice workspace configuration, but you're still not Iron Man. You still don't have that personal assistant. You can't, you know, tell Jarvis, hey, do this spreadsheet for me because I need to go get some lunch, and you know what to do. We're not quite there yet, but it is very fun to kind of throw something out there and see what users like, and then, you know, very quickly come back and iterate. And if we do our research up front, very rarely are we kind of going back to the drawing board with a blank slate. Almost always we're taking, you know, one or two or maybe more pieces of information that we've learned from that previous attempt, and then, you know, let's give it one more shot. And so I think that applies across, you know, every industry that's exploring the metaverse, or even just my previous job, I worked in bringing augmented reality work instructions to the manufacturing industry. And that space, you know, is even lagging behind to the point where they're still using paper work instructions and paper spreadsheets to fill out, you know, what products are coming down the line. And how can you expect someone to put on something like a HoloLens or HoloLens 2 when, you know, they don't even have to use a computer at work? And so there's a huge learning curve kind of meeting people where they're at. And I feel like our research lead, our UX research lead, Ava at Immersed, she was telling me not that long ago that with XR, there's just this explosion of user experience research going on, because before we were just dealing with, you know, a 2D web page, or, you know, a phone app, make the menus look nice, make sure it's fluid and stuff is in the right place. But with virtual reality and, you know, any kind of 3D application, there's a whole another set of principles. And game designers have had to deal with this, you know, for a lot longer than, you know, maybe a product designer is now having to deal with it. So I like to lean on kind of that, those who have been in the industry and kind of tackled very similar problems before. We have a technical artist on our team named Alan, and Alan is just a beast when it comes to figuring out how to get performance out of standalone VR devices, because he's had to work with so many limited resources for so long in the games industry. So all that's to say is, you know, we're not quite there yet, but we have a lot of pieces to start experimenting, and the more we can experiment, the better. Long-winded answer.
No worries. I loved it. I agree with you guys totally. Like there are just a lot of moving parts, and it's a lot right now. And it just seems like you guys were saying, we don't have like a basic structure for what we want this to look like. And that's okay, right? We don't need to have one right this second. There's no reason to. Like Raphael was saying, none of this stuff is set in stone. We can change it up at our will like we want to. I wanted to ask on a little more like a health conscious kind of note. I wanted to start with you, Avinash. Do you guys think that this concept of like the metaverse and like a virtual reality is like a healthy option for human beings? Like this virtual socializing and stuff like that, is this going to lead to any prolonged issues with mental health or anything down the line, do you think? Or do you think we'll get the same out of this virtual world that we do out of the real world?
See, the social aspect of the virtual world has always been there. The people meeting on the internet and interacting and engaging with various activities has always been there. Right now, we will see kind of an inertia uh, of when people use these head-mounted devices or live in these virtual worlds with superpowers. When they go back to the real world, they should not carry the same baggage, right? So sometimes people get stressed, and in this virtual world, you could be jumping from a building, but when somebody does that in real world, it's tragedy, right? So these are new age challenges that the metaverse will face going forward, because in this virtual world there are many new things which are not natural and not real, um, and especially the younger generation who's now getting, who are very active in this world. They should not start imitating the unreal world in the real world, so that leads to more disasters, right? So that's the biggest concern. Otherwise, the good part is, it's uh, especially coming from I'm coming, and shopping has always been a social experience, and here's an opportunity. Though there is this all social media and social commerce already existing, still did not give that immersive experience of interacting and shopping along with your friends, and now visiting different stores, or and conversational commerce experience. And now we are able to roll out those experiences, and we work with the various fashion brands, and each one of them is trying to create a completely new experience, and it need not be inside a four-walled showroom, but they are taking commerce into the real world, and making it even more interactive and social. For example, there are brands that work very closely with the, sustainability and circular economy, and circular fashion. So there are a few brands which are taking your merchandise into that underwater world, and especially when you have younger and children and as your target audience, target customers, then creating those experiences underwater uh, are something that is totally that was not possible earlier. But here is an opportunity for everybody to create new experiences, and the key driver here is experience and technology. Like everybody said in this panel, technology and device um, are will always transform and evolve, but the underlying factor is the experience that needs to get better as we progress. Thank you.
Yeah, one
Add to that for sure, please.
Yeah, one thing I want to speak to on the topic of mental health is we regularly, but we also have a customer success channel where people can kind of post what worked for them and why it worked. And since COVID, we've had multiple testimonies from our users basically saying, I started working from home at the beginning of COVID. I'm working from my kitchen table, and stepping into Immerse to do my work is a refresh. It makes me forget that, I'm cooped up at home. I can jump into a public room and see some other people working. And it's kind of, even though Immerse still has a lot of stuff we want to do with the social collaborative side and having even more environments that are more immersive and a larger variety, people are already kind of finding that escape from what they want to escape from in the virtual world. And I feel like it's a fine line to walk where Immersed has taken the stance that we don't want people spending 14 hours a day in Immersed. The idea is that when you step into Immersed, you're that you need, you can collaborate with other elements to make your work, if you're doing work on a computer or collaborating with others remotely, more enjoyable. So there's a lot that XR technology can bring to the table to kind of surpass the limitations that we have. So regardless of if you're working out of a conversion van traveling the country, or you're hanging out in your living room couch, you can have your optimal work setup with you all the time. And if you have that, then maybe you can be more productive, and maybe you can get some more time back and get outside, get some sunlight. I don't know. I will be the first person to say that the virtual world, the food sucks and the sun doesn't heat up your skin. So maybe that wasn't an elegant way of putting it, but the fundamental thing is we can't just escape into the virtual world. At some point, we do have to come out. And when we don't have to come out, that'll be the Matrix, and that's a whole nother topic of conversation. But for the near-term future, we're going to be spending time in virtual worlds and then coming back to reality. And we already kind of do that on social media and kind of watching from afar. But I think it's only going to become more apparent, some of the things that people like to do in the virtual world versus in real life. Maybe I don't want to own a giant bronze statue in real life because it's heavy and hard to move and, other limitations, but I do want one in my office. And so with Immersed, I could place my, NFT bronze statue of, I don't know, my favorite game character is Spyro the Dragon. So let's say, the Spyro statue.
Shout out to Spyro real quick.
Yeah.
Fantastic game.
And fun little anecdote about Spyro, it's acclaimed for its game design. It's known for its beautiful virtual worlds and kind of setting a lot of tones for 3D, games. And I feel like we're going to see a lot of Spyros that pop up in this emerging metaverse, where people are going to be like, oh, that way of locomotion just works, or that felt really good. Let's try that out over here. And so, we still have a long ways to go. I don't know if you guys have played the Spyro remaster, but it in my mind, I'm like, it's the same game mechanics, but just so much better. And I feel like we're going to get some, very fundamental pieces in the next, 5, maybe 10 years. And then similar to what Raphael said, we'll have to then take those pieces and actually do something with them. So, yeah, I hope the analogy came through.
Yeah. Raphael, I wanted to kind of jump to you, piggybacking off of that. What do you think about Meta / Facebook diving into this space, being so heavily involved? Is this a force of nature for good, for bad? What do you think?
So I think that they're trying. I don't think that it's evil, but I think they're often deluded. I think that so I'll answer it on a couple levels real quick. So on one level, Facebook as a company, they can call themselves like I don't call Google Alphabet, I'll call them Facebook. They're still basically Facebook with a few things added on. Facebook went through a period in the early part of the last decade where they felt a lot of angst for not having devices of their own. That's what they had 2 attempts at building smartphones, and they built Java-based smartphones, which were built mostly by web engineers, and they didn't go and recruit hardware and operating systems people, and they struggled and they fell on their face a couple of times. And then after that, they went and bought Oculus. They basically said, we lost the smartphone generation, but Mark Zuckerberg on a basic level, and I've had Microsoft folks who are ex-Facebook folks tell me this directly. Mark Zuckerberg hates the notion that he has to submit Facebook apps to Apple and Google, and about 50% of them get rejected. He hates the notion that he can't get any user data that he wants to anytime. And what that means is that he sat down and, and he basically said, okay, let me think about sci-fi, like what's next, what's after the smartphone? And he was, and he probably asked around, and everybody kind of knows after the smartphone, you kind of go to a smart glasses thing. Everyone's trying to figure that out. And he basically said, we need to be a hardware provider. We need to own a direct channel from the device to, from the user to the device. We need to understand the operating system and the hardware, and we need to get user data, especially biometric data and also telemetric data directly. That Facebook wants to be on the same level as Apple and Google, never mind Samsung or Sony or Microsoft or Nintendo. I'm not entirely against that, but if they're going to do that, they need to stop thinking like an advertising company. Facebook at its core is an advertising company. They sell user data, they data mine users to be the largest advertising company in the world. And they are not the sort of surveillance advertising of a Google or an Amazon where you go to their site. They track you everywhere. I'm not against Facebook restructuring to be a hardware company where we go, where they go like, hey, if you're a Sony or you're an Apple or you're a Samsung, you make your money off of hardware, and therefore you're more inclined to protect user privacy. Facebook is not inclined to protect user privacy. And so it's not a Web 2 versus Web 3 thing or anything like that. It's that Facebook at a basic level wants to mine user telemetric and biometric data to sell it to others. And that at its core, to me, is against a notion of a metaverse, because they want to take your privacy and expose it on any and every level. I've read the terms of service of the Quests, frankly, every Oculus device. So why I'm very careful about when and how I use them, because Oculus was, and now Facebook, now Meta, has been the only consistent XR device manufacturer that was tracking motion data. They want to identify every user through motion, through eye tracking, through voice. They want to build profiles to sell them to others. And on a basic level, as a human who wants to be able to understand and control my data, that to me doesn't jibe with a metaverse. So I'm not against Facebook, I'm against their business, because their business is to sell my data, to data mine the hell out of me, and to not let me know. And I want them to be a productive part, but not to exploit me or to exploit others. So I hope that they can reform. I hope that in taking on Oculus somewhere in the next while, they can think like a hardware company, a device manufacturer that says, hey, if we own this relationship, we need to actually show people that they can have confidence in protecting the data and not be an advertising company. But it's just hard because they're still not doing that. And they've been complaining about Apple's privacy, where they should be going, oh, this is a lesson for what users want. Users want to control their data. And in a metaverse, they should be able to say, my data has value. I should be able to decide when you use it and how you use it. And if you profit off of it, I should be able to decide that, and I should be able to profit off of it also. And I should be able to turn off the switch or turn off the valve when I don't want you to profit off of it. And that's the thing that Facebook can probably, like, I think it's just in their DNA. Even if they sell hardware, they can't stop being an advertising company. You are what your revenue is. And Facebook is losing money on hardware and making money on advertising. So they are an advertising company first and foremost, and I would love them to stop that.
I think you
it'll
just put that perfectly. Yeah, please follow up, but I really love the way you set that up.
I like the way that you set it up as well. I mean, I remember being, I've been on Facebook since I was a teen. I had babysitters growing up that had Facebooks and MySpace pages, and I've friends that learned how to program just to customize their MySpace page. And I mean, I feel like at the core of the social side of the metaverse, there needs to be, some way to aggregate and share either what your interests are, what your preferences are, whether it's, what's my username or pronouns, or, can you use my NFT avatar or you can't, or am I allowing you to capture my motion data or not? I feel like all of these things need to have switches that can be turned on and off, and people need to have a very concrete understanding of where their data is being used and how. And I feel like Facebook over the years has taken some steps to at least make data more transparent to the user, as far as I'm talking about the Web 2 platform. So there's a very nice privacy page on Facebook that has nice icons that kind of explain and have help pages for where to go and look at how that data is being used. But yeah, in Web 3, in immersive experiences, it's a free-for-all. And I don't know if we'll be able to move away from that on the platform side of things, unless we get to like a completely open platform standard, which would be, ideal to be able to, kind of treat XR experiences like websites and just kind of surf the metaverse and jump from one to the other, and have cookies to save your credentials and bring them to the next or what have you. But there's so many parallels that need to be drawn to make this more open, more safe. There's no VR headset data security protection software you can install to make sure you're safe from malicious attackers and things like that. We're very reliant on the platforms. And so kind of bringing it back to, my sphere, what I look at on a day-to-day, Immerse tries to do as much as we can with as little data as possible. And that's both from like a liability standpoint, like we just don't want to collect user data because if somehow that got out, we would be liable for it. But then it's also, it's a lot easier to get something past a user, especially a user that's willing to do their homework and kind of ask the right questions. And it's a lot easier to say, we don't collect any data except for your Oculus ID. So that way we can authenticate you into your account. That's it. And we've found that it's been extremely effective with our users, where we've had users at major tech companies use our software, and the reason they're allowed to use it on their work computer is because in our terms and agreements it says we're not collecting your screen data, we're not collecting anything but your username and an ID for the computer that you were connected to. And that both it helps expand the use cases, being able to get immersed where some other apps might not be able to, but the Oculus, the way that Meta collects its data is sorry, is more or less out of our control. And so people, creators that are using these platforms should think carefully about, do I really need to tap into this system? What kind of value is it going to bring to my users? If it's going to collect data, how do I translate that to my users and kind of evangelize the benefit of it, or tell them where to shut it off if they don't want to have it? There's a lot of considerations to have that exceed the number of considerations to have even on Web 2. And that's saying something, because I feel like people don't even fully embrace, what data privacy and data ownership and security means on Web 2. So there's a lot of work that has to be done just educating everyday people. Like, this is something you should be concerned about and look at, and maybe we need to push back on the companies instead of having a giant, read this agreement and sign here. Being able to have things that are visual and stuff that normal people can understand, because I can't tell you how many times just doing everyday things I've had to tap my friend who's a lawyer, or basically say, I can't sign this right now because it's 15 pages and I need to read all of it. And some people don't even think twice. So yeah, I think we have a long ways to go.
Yeah, and I totally agree on the education part of that too. I think that's probably one of the most important pieces, because once I figured out about how companies collect our data, and then this kind of Web3 metaverse narrative comes around, and it's like, you can control your data and you can profit off of this, and if you're willing to let other companies profit off of your data, you can do so, but it is your decision. And I think that is super liberating in a way, because it just gives you that extra kind of control on your life that we haven't had during Web 2, I guess, is kind of how I would put it. But Raphael, did you want to piggyback up off of what Ryan had to say?
Yeah. And this again is where, like, it's not really like Web 2 or Web 3, because Web 2 and Web 3 are both basically 2D interfaces. So part of what Ryan's getting at is that there's this XR or spatial computing notion of biometric data as opposed to telemetric data. Like, telemetric data is where we have purchase history. And keep in mind, like, Web3 is mostly dealing with things that are telemetric. Have I purchased this thing? Is there a contract that says I own this thing, but not what is this thing? Web3 is actually painfully bad and deficient. And this is why, we'll get to Web 5, Web 6, whatever. We need to keep going forward, because we need to not just go, do I own this thing on a level, and is there a pointer that says it's hosted somewhere? We need to be able to actually host digital twins in the contract with which Web3 cannot do. If it tries to do it, it becomes exponentially expensive. So think of it more this way. Telemetric data we've had since the late 90s. That's like, do I have your account name? Do I have your real name? Do I have your purchase transaction history, your street address, your bank data? Like, that's telemetric data. We've been doing that since we've had online games. But biometric is, how do I move? Do we have tracking of your movement, of your body, of your retinas? Because those things, to Ryan's point, those things are incredibly valuable. Facebook has already shown and talked about what we kind of have known for a while, which is everyone moves uniquely differently. If you get enough motion data of someone's body, it is as unique as their hand signature. If you get enough data of their eye tracking, you know what they're looking at, and you can infer what their attentional focus is. There's a whole range of biometric data of voice, of looking, of movement, of being, of presence, that Web3 doesn't understand at all, and frankly doesn't have the container capacity to deal with on any level. So scanning people, understanding who and what we are, being able to look through a pass-through video, broadcasting audio, all of these things are beyond Web3. I can't stress that enough. XR is going beyond Web3. XR is not Web2 or Web3. It is spatial computing that we're still trying to figure out how to contain. And Facebook is racing ahead. They're different from what Apple and Sony and Samsung, like the device manufacturers, HTC and others, they're focused on like, can we make it functional? Facebook is going, how can we profit off of it? And so what we need to focus on in many respects is not Web2 or Web3, because we can have a mediation between a centralized and decentralized, or between a walled garden and an open garden. But do we understand the amount of data that we have, and can we allow spaces for that data to grow almost exponentially and actually keep track of it and allow people to access that data and have their own agency for when that data goes to another, and say, hey, Facebook, you get these pieces of my data and not those. Okay, I'm going into Grand Theft Auto 12 and it gets these pieces of data. But the telemetric data is what you can put into a spreadsheet. The biometric data is the capturing of your presence in real life and taking it into the virtual. And we have to find new ways to protect that, because Facebook has been doing things differently from a lot of these other companies, and it's a little scary. And I'll just say that, like, I started, there with John Carmack back in 2011 with, an Oculus prototype headset on his desk down in Mesquite, Texas, and him going like, basically going like this, I've got a phone is going to become this, and like convincing me that it was time for VR. But he, like all of those other early Oculus people, are no longer Facebook, because at a certain point they had a distaste for what Facebook is doing. They took their golden handcuffs, they cashed out, they walked away, and Facebook rolls on. So we need to find better ways to push the corporations to respect our data, and we need to find ways to track biometric versus telemetric data. And maybe that's Web 4 or Web 5, but we're not there yet. And we need to be able to handle almost exponential data. And another way to think about it is that we need a better understanding of blockchain and cloud together, because cloud can hold the data, and maybe blockchain can allow you to go from one experience to another.
Man, I love it. I think this is easily one of the better conversations I've ever had on this app. You guys have really opened my eyes to these things, like telemetric data and biometric data and spatial computing, stuff like that. Those are things that I was not aware were, not necessarily like issues that we have to deal with, but at the same token, issues that we have to deal with. But thank you guys for coming down today. Seriously, I had a great time with you. I just wanted to get a couple things mentioned real quick before we leave. You guys can find more about our opportunities in Connect.Club if you visit the welcome room by Connect.Club, and you can just access it by going back to the menu that we started in, and it's just a regular networking room that people just chat in and just hang out, and other people just come and ask questions after we've done one of these talks. Any of the hosts will be happy to walk you through the app and show you features and stuff like that. But with that being said, thank you three for joining me today, and have a great day.
Thank you for the opportunity. It was great to join you, Raphael, and
Likewise.
and Avinash.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
Thanks, guys, and thanks for having me here. I think it's a great experience on this platform.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
It was
I'm glad you
great to be
enjoyed.
here with you guys.
Better,
keep in touch.
better than just a video chat or like Twitter Spaces. It's a happy in between.
Yeah, I agree. That's awesome. But we'll definitely keep in touch. I'll probably reach out to you guys personally and talk some more soon. But with that being said, have a great day, guys, and peace out. Keep building.
Cheers, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Cheers, everybody. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.